guys, it's Kelly here and I am back with another video. Today's video is featuring some products from Spellbinders. I am using the Breezy Swing, the Sneak and a Kiss, and then this is a clear stamp and die set. They're sold separately now, but that's called Big Love. And then a couple of embossing folders. And so companies categorize things differently. So you probably can't see. Oh, I'm also using these two cardstocks, which are I showed in a recent video. And then here are some pattern papers. And that's really what we're going to concentrate on today, is incorporating our pattern papers into our card design. But you could see here, these are all ones that I already had like scraps of. I've already cut out from them. And so I just picked ones that would work well together. And then the little heart one, these are their full-size paper pads. Most of these are Honeybee and the solid colors are Spellbinders. So when I'm doing any sort of paper piecing or putting together, this is kind of like a layered die, I like to take them all out and then I separate them out into groups by color. So the swing and the strings for the swing, the rope, I know is going to be the same color. I'll separate those out. The leaves and the flowers, they're going to go together. And then because I'm using two different dies here, I'm going to do the same thing then with the second bunch of dies. Over there, you'll see white. You can cut all of these out of white and just color them with markers or colored pencils or whatever you have. That's totally an option. But I'm only going to cut the areas out of white that I need to be able to color, such as their skin tone or their hair, things like that. But for the pattern paper, I'm going to use that for a lot of the fun focal points. So that floral is what I'm going to use for my girl's dress. One thing to keep in mind when you're putting your die cuts, putting your dies down, is you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the way that the paper runs. So I wouldn't want to cut my umbrella on that heart pattern upside down, because then my hearts will be upside down. So one of those things that's just a little tip that you can hang on to. Here, I knew I was going to be cutting my flowers out of multiple colors. And so I'm doing some that are solid color cardstocks, and then I'm doing some that are a lighter pattern. Here, this again, you can see this is another scrap, so I'm cutting these out of craft, and then I will add more shading and dimension to them once I have them all die cut out. And basically, I'm going to trim them down because most of these are very large pieces of pattern paper, and I don't love die cutting. And if you watch my channel, that's not a secret to you. So I like to be able to get them all done as quickly as possible. So for this one, the teals that I'm cutting the leaves out of, I'm cutting them a little bit larger than the actual die, and that's because I intend to cut multiples out. And then you can just lay it all out of your die cutting machine. It reminds me very much of the Cricut mats, where you would just lay them all out and then snuggle them up next to each other so you could die cut them all at one time. And then I just keep a little cup here, and I will put all of the die cuts kind of as they come out of the machine right into my cup so that I can find them in order to separate them out. So let's talk about the dies that I'm using. Oh no, we have to talk about this part first. We do. So here, this is the stamp set, and I am going to be stamping the large love as well as the branches and the hearts. I'm going to be doing some heat embossing. And so I'm going to stamp these onto my cardstock, and you can see the one on the bottom is the other pattern paper, the one that matches her dress. I actually didn't end up using that one. I ended up using the one that was the stripe, but basically what we're going to do here is we are going to protect the pattern and make it a little bit more interesting with some shiny embossing. And so we're just going to treat it with our anti-static tool. And then we're going to ink it up with Versamark, which is just a clear, sticky embossing ink. There are several companies that have different ones on the market. Versamark is kind of like the tried and true. And then I'm going to stamp these down. Now I do, since I'm using a stamp positioner, I do prefer to stamp mine twice just to make sure that I'm having really good coverage. And so once I get them stamped down twice, then here you could do them in any color you wanted. You could do them in white. I'm going to do them in this is sparkle, but it's a clear embossing. So you're still going to be able to see the pattern through it. It's really just going to add a nice like glossy layer of glitter over top of them. And it does, you'll be able to see, like when I stamp them, you could probably see them very faintly. That clear embossing ink does make them slightly darker than their natural color. And so, you will be able to see them in comparison to the background. And one of the cards is that dahlia color, that darker pink. I cut some of the hearts out in that, and then I use my background as that as well. And you can very clearly tell the difference between them just with the embossing. And then here is the love stamped on the stripe, which is the one that I did end up using. And then just stamped with that embossing ink and heat set with that same sparkle clear embossing powder. Once this portion is done, then we will die cut out all of them with their coordinating dies, and then we will get into the coloring. So like I said, you probably cannot see Spellbinders labels, all of theirs, when they send them to us, like as guest designers, they label them by what club they belong to. And so these clubs are part of older ones that they still have stock of and that are being released. And so they are having an enormous sale. Today is actually the last day for it, for a clearance clean out sale. It says up to 70% off, and they are not kidding. There's something for everybody. It is such a phenomenal sale. But the thing that I actually love the most about it is it kind of inspired me, like when I was looking, because I mean, even though I do this for a living, like I still shop the sales, y'all. I mean, I still do. It reminded me of stuff that I already had. And these are back from not even 24. These are back from 23. But they're still super cute. They still absolutely, read as Valentine's cards because, for two of them, that was when they were released. One of them was December of 23, and one of them, the love one and the sneaking a kiss, were December of 23. The breezy swing one was August of 23, but she's great. And I did use her in another... Did I use her? I think I used a similar one, maybe that was a beach scene. But here, so what you see me doing is because these are all going to be layered on top of each other, I'm going in and marking where the shadows are going to be so then I can go in with my alcohol markers. So with the legs, like one is positioned behind the other, so that one in the front is going to be considerably lighter. Same thing like with her hands. That little teeny tiny part that you see is actually the top of her hand, and that's the rope for the swing goes in between them. So that one's going to be substantially lighter where the other one will be darker. This one, it has the hair, the head and the chest, and then just the head. And so these will all layer on top of each other to create a super dimensional look. We're just adding more dimension with our markers. And so I do try to, because they're going to be photographed together. You guys watch my channel, you know this. Like, I'm very matchy-matchy. So I do try to make sure that they are matching together. I know that I have that wood seat, and then also I incorporated the brown in the pants of the sneaking a kiss. There's a pair of pants in there that I made brown as well. So I do try to, incorporate them so that they're all matchy-matchy. But I really like, this is very much like paper dolls, like when I was a kid. And I think that's super fun. So that weird looking one, which I'm not going to lie, did take me a while to figure out, like, what are you? Exactly. And then I couldn't get it to hold still because it doesn't go all the way up behind the dress. It's just like a very small portion at the bottom, and I just was not holding it in the right spot in order to get the shadow. Um, and so you could do, which I did, I'll be honest with you, like I cut out a bunch of extras to see like what I liked and what I didn't like, and then that gives me the opportunity to build more cards if I want to. So originally underneath that flower I had cut a stripe pattern, but I didn't like it. It just didn't look right. So, and then here, even though we have this wonderful pattern that's already there, we're going to add just a little bit of shading with our gray markers to really kind of give it some shape. So that way it looks a little bit more realistic. I chose warm grays, but you could use any grays that you have. I'm going to bring in some cooler grays as well. So anyway, back to this sale. There is literally something for everybody. I'm not kidding. This stamp set that I'm using is $6. The dies that match it are $7. There's $2 stickers in there. There's glimmer plates, there's better press plates, there's embossing folders. The 3 embossing folders that I pulled out to use with these cards, I actually only ended up using 2, but they're all on sale for $5. So just really, really good deals. And there's pages and pages, which I didn't go through all of them. But I'm sure you will want to head over and check it out, especially if you're looking for something on a budget. If you already own these, which I think we're all kind of guilty of, I don't currently subscribe to any card making kits, but I have in the past. And what I found was that I was more of a collector versus a creator. And I didn't love that. Side note, back to the card. So here, I decided that I was going to shade it in just the cooler grays. I actually didn't love that. And so I'm going to bring in a blue to kind of blend out the gray. And then I'm actually going to bring in another one here in a little bit. But for the skirt, you can see where the, like the little pleats or the draping is already, put inside the skirt. So I just followed those. And then for his shirt, this is like the base piece. I just did some shading with those cool grays. You do want to leave the majority of it white. And then for the reds, I tried doing, can you see that hat up in the right-hand corner? I tried bringing in some reds to do the shading. And honestly, it ended up being too red and not pink enough. So that's why, like, going forward, you'll see that I'm shading the reds with just the grays. And you can do that with any color. If you have just grays, then you can shade anything that you have. Here's where I'm kind of doctoring up his hat and bringing in more of a blue versus the gray, just because I didn't love that. And please forgive me. I know that some of these are kind of like down farther or off, off camera or close to being off camera. This did take me a while to do. And so you'll just have to forgive me because I was kind of in the zone. Here's where I'm bringing in, again, like I'm shading those reds, but I'm using grays to do it. And then going over it with just a lighter corally pink. What is that? R32, I think. For the little feet, you can see his socks. Am I the only person? It might be a my generation thing. I'm not entirely sure. But am I the only person out there who is bothered by pants that are short enough that you can see my socks? I don't even want to be seated and have you see my socks. When I am seated, I still want my pants to be long enough that you cannot see my socks. It bothers me in this card. Like when we put the whole thing together, you can see his socks and I'm like, but why? Like, where's the flood, my dude? I don't know why that bothers me, but it's still to this day. This is a perfect example of do as I say, not do as I do. I should have started in the middle. I didn't. I thought I knew what I was doing, and so I started on the right-hand side. By the time I realized that I had no idea what I was doing, the glue was already dry. So I tried removing it, but it was not working. So I did remove the red one because that one had not adhered down yet. And then I went in and did the middle. This did mean that one side of my umbrella had a black outline and the other side did not. So I ended up having to trim it. We just have to, we got to make decisions on the fly here because I was not recutting the whole thing. And it's still, I think it ended up looking fine. I don't think anybody is going to miss the fact that there's just that little extra, it's just slightly smaller. The right-hand side is just slightly smaller than the left-hand side. I don't think anybody is going to notice that. So yeah, I think it's because like when I was a kid, well, I think my whole generation, like, no, you weren't looking at anybody's socks. Like we had very long pants, very, very long pants. But when I was a kid, my son is built just like me. And I was very thin, but I was very long. So I've always had like long legs, but I was very, very thin. I took after my grandfather and my son takes after me. So much so that like girls' pants, they did not make sizes that were small enough in the waist but long enough in the pants or in the length that they would fit me so that appropriately. I was so upset to the extreme that my mother had to start buying me boys jeans because women's or girls jeans are sized like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, you know what I'm saying, and boys are like 30 by 34. 34 is my inseam, by the way. Like I have very long legs. And so growing up, when I wore girls' jeans, they were very, very short. They were floods. You could see my socks. It was traumatic. That's slightly over dramatic, but I really did not like it. But I also didn't want to wear boys' jeans because I was a tall, thin girl. And so I was a little later to blossom than the rest of my friends. So I already very much felt like boys' jeans were not for me. Anywho, so but you can see his socks in this one. Please tell me, is it my generation thing? I'm a kid of the 90s, well 80s and 90s, but you know what I'm saying. If you're around that age, let me know. I would love to know. So here we have built our breezy swing girl. I think she's so cute. She's got her little hat, and you can see how they have cut those slivers in there. So the face tucks into the hair tucks into the hat, like all of those things. It looks a little crazy when you have them all separate and, you're not really sure how they're all going to go together. But once it's all together, I think she's really very adorable. I have to put her hands on, which is a little bit... It's a little bit tricky because those pieces are a little bit small, but if you have a pair of tweezers, that's going to really be your best friend. What were we talking about? Oh, this tail. So yeah, there really is something for everyone in there. And if you are a person who has turned into a collector versus a creator, maybe this will inspire you to go back to some of those clubs that maybe you already have, or if you're a person on a budget and you were like, I never subscribed to the clubs because I couldn't afford it. These are the same clubs that you could have got, whatever, a year ago or 2 years, in my case, 2 years ago. But I don't see anything wrong with them. I still think that they are like, the style is very on trend. I think they're really adorable. And for $6, I didn't pay the $6 because I already owned them. But I definitely had not thought about them or thought about using them in quite some time. So I'm glad for kind of like these clearance sales, not just because I'm a cheap chicken, but also sometimes it reminds me like, oh, hey, I already own that. Maybe I should go back and use it. Do you guys How do you guys feel about the subscriptions? I think that if you're a person who utilizes them, or if you're a person on a budget and you're trying to get like the most product for the money that you have, I do think a lot of them are very generous. Like Spellbinders has kits, Hero Arts has kits. There's a bunch of other ones out there. And so I think that if you're trying to accumulate things, like if you're a beginner, or on a pretty severe budget, which I was when I first started crafting, like they can be really helpful to kind of build up your stash, but only if you actually use them. In my case, what are the ones that I did? They're probably not even any, what were they? Something doodle? I keep wanting to say snickerdoodle, but that's a cookie. What were they? I don't even know. Anyway, it was for scrapbooking. That's how long ago it was. I haven't even been a scrapbooker in, Lord, 15 years? Yeah, 15 years. So, if you were a person who subscribed to the scrapbook thing and you know what I'm talking about, you let me know what the name of it was. But anyway, it had like these really beautiful florals and beads, a lot of Prima stuff. And like I would just gather them and they would just be there and I would not be using them because I was no longer a scrapbooker. And then I did do I think the Simon Says stamp kits I did for a little while, but again, I never used the whole box. I would use the inks that came, I would use the stamps that came or the dies that came. But if there was a paste in there or something, I didn't necessarily use it, or if there was pattern paper in there, I didn't necessarily use it. So here using the pattern paper, because I do have bunches of it, like a lot of people do, and I just really never think to use it with these types of dies where, you're creating outfits or, if you have a lot of florals, I think, like what was the orange one? It's like the peachy one that I used for my flowers. Like that was more of like a textile print. I think those would be really great on the flowers. Or patterns on their shirts, patterns on their dresses. If you are a person who has lots of people dies, I don't have that many, but when I do, this is typically how I like to use them because it adds interest and helps me to use the things that I already have. So here, this one is kind of all put together, but if you'll notice when you look around, like there's a lot of extra pieces parts for each and every one of these. Like up top there, I cut out 2 or 3 like patterned shirts for him. I cut out 2 skirts for her. I cut out 2 or 3 umbrellas, and this is just to help me in making the decision, and then I can make more cards if I want. Here, I've picked out a couple of cards that are repeating, or a couple of cardstocks that are repeating the same colors I'm using with the die cutting, and I am running them through with just a regular embossing folder. Like I said, all of these are going for like $5. And then I'm going to start building my cards. So her, I knew I wanted to put like with a lot of the flowers. And so I thought the white background would be the best, but then that little bit of texture from the embossing folder is going to add interest without overwhelming our focal point. The problem is here, I did it and I haven't trimmed this down yet, and I do want to mat it. So I'm going to have to glue all of my flowers down in order to keep them where I want them. I could have done press and seal, but I was worried that because of the multiple layers, I would have a hard time picking all of it up. So I just chose to put on a little bit of glue on top of my flowers and then press it down to pick up my leaves. And then once I had a larger kind of bouquet, I just slipped some glue behind the backs of them. And here, like, I tried to keep it kind of like a diagonal design, like everything kind of in the top right corner, which leaves me a little bit of open area in the bottom left for my sentiment. And then I do want to trim this down because I want to mat it on, I think it's called Teal Topaz. I'll link everything below. But, oh, that's the thing I forgot to tell you. Those paper packs that I told you last time, like a week or so ago, I was like, these are great, pick them up. They are also on sale for $10, which is, I mean, when it comes to colored cardstock, that's pretty good because there's a lot of paper in there. So anyway, once I got all of the flowers down, I'm going to glue her down, but I did not trim it. And so before, I used to only own one of these sliding trimmers, which does not cut embossed or textured cardstock very well. It rips it a lot of the times. And so back in Christmas, I still think they have it on, are selling it. It's like the Essential Crafters bundle. I ended up picking that up for a very good price because it had a lot of the things in there that I wanted, but then it also had this guillotine trimmer, which works so much better for trimming those textured cardstocks, as well as like if you have multiple pieces. So like here, I'm going to have to cut through some of my flowers, and it cut through and it was not a problem. I messed around with this one to see whether or not I wanted to use the embossed background, and honestly, I just liked it better without it. So this might be a little plain for some people, but I think it's really cute. It lets the little heart umbrella, you know, kind of be the star of the show. There isn't a lot of competition. This little heart is included in that same die set, as well as another kind of heart and the little lines, and then they have like a script, love you. It's a really cute little die. Those were previous small dies of the month, in case you're ever, you know, curious. So then I'm going to use that line of the heart to ground my little couple. And then I'll trim off the little red line, and then I'm going to mount this just on a white card base. It's cut slightly smaller, just because I think the matte gives it a nice finished edge. I did decide to add a couple of little hearts around it, but you'll see that in a little bit. This one is the love. So I do have another technique that you can use with pattern paper and embossing. Please let me know if you would like to see that, if you are a person who has a lot of pattern paper that you would like some ideas for. But this one, because the die is so close to the stamp, like you could have not stamped it and cut the die and it still would have said love. But I like the little addition of the added sparkle. I decided that I was going to pop this up to create a little bit of separation, because the stripe matches the background pretty well. And then those hearts are on the same color cardstock. They only look darker because of the embossing. I mean, obviously not the lighter pink ones. Those are completely different color. But here for this one, I kept it like totally nice and simple. I chose the sentiment that says Happy Valentine's Day, and I'm going to stamp that in black. They have black shoes. The outline of the umbrella is black, so those match together right underneath it. And then here is the hearts that I decided to put with it. Now, these are from the Big Love set, but you could use any, you know, hearts that you have, any other die cuts. For the other two sentiments, I am using that Dahlia and Teal Topaz, and I'm going to white heat emboss on top of them. So I treated them with my anti-static tool and then stamped them down in white pigment ink, and then sprinkled on some white detail embossing powder. So, yeah, so I found myself purchasing the kits but not really using them. So you just have to make sure that I found it was easier to use them if when I got them, I kind of unpacked them, because before, and I'm talking about way before, like I don't even know if I was married yet, honestly, in this before. I would get the boxes, I would open them up, I would see what was in there, and then I would just stack the boxes. And so I found it to be much easier to actually use the products if I unpacked them. So just a little piece of advice, maybe if you're struggling to use your kits as well. So here I did trim the sentiment so that I could fit it a little better next to her. And then I accented with some aura rhinestones. I added some glitter to the 2 paper pieced ones as well as some white highlights. The love one has all the shimmer from the embossing, so I don't need to add anything there. And then this is all 3 of the cards. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope it inspires you to use your pattern paper. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate your time, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye.